Let's begin in occupied Kashmir. Indian occupation forces have martyred another freedom fighter in Srinagar. Junaid Sahrai was killed along with his associate during a cordon and search operation. This comes nearly 2 weeks after the killing of top freedom fighter Riaz Neku in the Pulwama district. Indian forces have killed more than 20 Kashmiris in the last 30 days. Occupied Kashmir is reeling under a curfew and communications blackout since India stripped the region of its autonomy last August. Pakistan's military says 7 soldiers have embraced martyrdom in 2 separate incidents in the Midwestern Balochistan province. The military's media wing said 6 were martyred in an IED blast in Mach, while 1 in crossfiring with militants in the Mand area of Cage district. In a statement, the Inter-Services Public Relations said an FC vehicle was struck with an IED while returning to base camp after a routine patrol duty. The media wing said the martyred included a junior commissioned officer and a civilian driver. The ISPR said Naib Subedar Ihsanullah Khan, Naik Zubair Khan, Naik Ijaz Ahmed and Naik Mola Bakhsh are among those martyred in Mach. Meanwhile, Sipoy Imdad Ali was the name of the martyred personnel in Cage. Pakistan has reported 39 more deaths from coronavirus in the past 24 hours, taking the tally to 939. The health ministry said the number of COVID-19 infections has risen to nearly 44,000 after over 1,800 more people tested positive. It said almost 12,500 coronavirus patients have recovered across the country. Officials said the province of Punjab has recorded nearly 16,000 cases, Sindh over 17,000, and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa more than 6,200. There are 2,820 infections in Balochistan and 1,034 in the capital, Islamabad. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Imran Khan says the government has to maintain a balance between protecting the economy and tackling COVID-19. He said the government has allowed industries to continue work, but they should implement preventive measures. In the U.S., the death toll from coronavirus has crossed 90,000 after 759 people died in the past 24 hours. The global COVID-19 death count has crossed 318,000 with over 4.8 million infections. More on that now in this report.
As the number of infection cases in the U.S. crosses 1,500,000, President Donald Trump tweeted to reopen the country. White House is now blaming its own scientists for the high number of deaths, saying the Center of Disease Control and Prevention let the country down with the COVID-19 testing. Meanwhile, Brazil has recorded 674 new deaths and also became the country with the 3rd highest number of infections after the US and Russia. Mexico has decided to start easing restrictions despite surging number of deaths and infection cases.
In Mexico, 51,663 have had COVID-19 since the start of the pandemic in Mexico, and that was on February 28, 2020. That was when the first case was detected. 11,300 cases have occurred in the last 14 days, an active period for the pandemic. Please note that recent cases keep on going up.
In the meantime, France's administrative court has ruled that the government must lift a blanket ban on meetings at places of worship within 8 days. But the UK's deputy chief medical officer has warned the coronavirus spread will most likely pick up again in autumn.
Only if we get a vaccine that is really capable of suppressing disease levels will we ever be what we would call kind of out of this. And so from that perspective, we may have to live and learn to live with this virus in the long term, and certainly for many months to come, if not several years.
China has reported 6 new COVID-19 cases with no deaths. Hong Kong has extended its social distancing measures that prohibit gathering of more than 8 people.
Well, the Yemeni army says it has killed 20 Houthi rebels and seized strategic military points in Nihm district east of the capital, Sana'a. The Houthis have not yet, though, commented on this development. In a statement, the government's coalition forces said many weapons and ammunition were also captured during their operation. It said the military liberated strategic areas in the mountains of Bahrah and Manama. Yemen has been beset by violence and chaos since 2014 after Houthi rebels overran much of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. A rocket attack has targeted the Iraqi capital Baghdad's heavily fortified diplomatic green zone. In a statement, the Iraqi military said the attack caused no casualties. The military said the rocket struck an empty house and was launched from an eastern district of Baghdad. However, witnesses said the rocket hit near the U.S. embassy. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack yet. A series of such raids targeted the U.S. embassy following the assassination of Iran's top general Qasem Soleimani by the Pentagon. Libya's UN-backed Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj and Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan have discussed the current situation in the war-torn country. In a statement, al-Sarraj's office said the two leaders also spoke about the implications of the offensive being waged on the capital Tripoli. They said a number of issues on bilateral cooperation were also discussed. The Prime Minister's office said the meeting was held under a memorandum of understanding signed between Libya and Turkey last November. Erdogan invited al-Sarraj to visit Turkey for this bilateral meeting. In Libya, Khalifa Haftar's forces say they will perform a tactical withdrawal from some front lines in southern Tripoli. The statement came a day after rebel forces lost the strategic Al-Watiya airbase to government forces. In a statement, spokesperson Ahmed al-Mismari said Haftar decided to withdraw so locals can enjoy Eid al-Fitr in peace. The government victory follows a months-long counter-offensive, which has pushed Haftar troops out of much of Libya's western coast. Haftar launched an offensive in April 2019 to seize control of Tripoli, resulting in a stalemated conflict in which over 1,000 people have been killed. Israel's outgoing Defense Minister Naftali Bennett claims Iran has begun withdrawing its forces from Syria. The minister made that statement without offering any evidence to support his assertion. In his address, Bennett claimed Iranian forces have also begun evacuating a number of bases in Syria. The outgoing minister urged his successor, Benny Gantz, to maintain pressure on Iran. The minister said the trend of Iranian forces might otherwise reverse in the war-torn country. Neither Iranian nor Syrian officials have responded to Bennett's comments as yet. Israel has carried out hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, targeting suspected arms and troop movements by Iran and Lebanese Hezbollah. United Nations Syria mediator has urged the U.S. and Russia to push for talks aimed at bringing about peace in the war-torn country. During a UN Security Council meeting, Geir Peterson asked both countries to make the most of the relative calm prevailing in Syria. He said since the beginning of the war, too many fleeting opportunities to turn dynamics towards a political path were lost. Peterson said those missed moments were followed by renewed violence and hardening positions. The envoy said renewed cooperation and trust building between international stakeholders and Syrians are essential. Peterson is the fourth UN envoy to try and mediate peace in Syria. Certain Muslim countries are imposing restrictions on Eid prayer congregations to prevent a mass outbreak of the new coronavirus. Turkey has announced a new 4-day curfew during the holidays. The country has opted to impose short weekend and holiday curfews instead of full lockdowns, fearing possible negative effects on the economy. President Erdogan said mosques would reopen for 2-day time prayers starting May 29th to be performed within social distancing rules. Earlier, Egypt also announced a partial curfew during Eid to maximize efforts to curb the COVID-19 infection rate. Saudi Arabia has also called on people to offer the Eid prayer at home instead of in mosques. Last week, Riyadh declared a 24-hour curfew across all cities and regions from May 23rd until May 27th. France's top court has ordered the government to lift its ban on gatherings at places of worship imposed to combat the COVID-19 spread. The Council of State ruled the ban was disproportionate and manifestly illegal. The administrative court has given Prime Minister Edouard Philippe 8 days to lift the blanket ban introduced on May 11th. Currently, all gatherings in places of worship are banned except for funerals, which are limited to 20 people. A February church gathering in eastern France is believed to be the spawning event of COVID-19 cases in the country. A U.S. biotechnology company, Moderna, is the first to report a vaccine that can train people's immune systems to fight coronavirus. Moderna says neutralizing antibodies were found in the first 8 people who took part in their safety trial. The company said the immune response was similar to people infected with the actual virus. It said larger trials to see whether the vaccination actually protects against infection are expected to start in July. The vaccine is a small snippet of the coronavirus genetic code, which is injected into the patient. Moderna says it is not capable of causing an infection or replicating symptoms of COVID-19, but is enough to provoke a response from the immune system. Germany and France have proposed a €500 billion fund to support the recovery of the European Union's coronavirus-stricken economies. The plan was unveiled by German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Emmanuel Macron during a joint video news conference. They said the amount would be raised through the EU-backed bonds and used to help industries and regions hardest hit by the pandemic. During the talks, both leaders agreed the funds should be provided as grants. Merkel said the current economic challenge requires this unusual, one-off effort that Germany and France are now prepared to take, while Macron said it is a major step forward and important for the Eurozone to remain united.
For the first time together, what we are proposing together, Germany and France together, to the 27 member states of the European Union is partly to decide altogether to raise a common debt in the markets and to use these 500 billion euros.
I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The European Union has backed the World Health Organization against U.S. President Trump's threat of permanently withdrawing its funding. In a briefing, the EU Foreign Affairs spokesperson said this is the time for solidarity and not for finger-pointing. Brussels has said it supports the WHO in its efforts to contain and mitigate the COVID-19 outbreak and provide additional funding to support these efforts. Meanwhile, the EU's resolution on the pandemic's impartial probe was adopted at the WHO's annual ministerial meeting. Earlier, responding to Trump's threat, China said the U.S. is trying to shift the blame for Washington's own mishandling of the COVID-19 crisis. In India, 18 more migrant workers have died in separate road accidents in the last 24 hours. To return to their homes amid a nationwide lockdown. 4 migrants have died and 15 were injured in Maharashtra when their bus rammed a truck in Yavatmal city. In Bihar, 9 laborers died and several were injured when a truck and a bus collided in Bhagalpur city. 5 migrant workers, including 3 women, lost their lives in different road accidents on highways in Uttar Pradesh. Meanwhile, dozens of migrants have clashed with police in the western state of Gujarat, demanding they be sent back to their homes. State officials said police fired tear gas shells to disperse rioters and detained nearly 100 protesters. Venezuela has released video testimonies from American citizens who were involved in the alleged military incursion into the country. In a video, U.S. citizen Luke Denman says one of their mission's objectives was to abduct Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro. Denman said they were tasked with securing an airfield to put Maduro on a plane to the U.S. He said they had evaluated it to be a pretty high-risk mission as they were effectively invading Venezuela. The Venezuelan Information Minister Jorge Rodriguez said his country has infiltrated Colombia's armed forces and intelligence services for information.
This information on alleged armed incursion is the result of the infiltration that we have within Colombian intelligence, within the intelligence of the Colombian armed forces.
Well, Venezuela has accused Colombia and the U.S. of planning and aiding the unsuccessful mission that both countries have denied. On to Argentina now, where paleontologists have found a 70-million-year-old remain of a megaraptor making it one of the last carnivorous dinosaurs to inhabit the Earth. More now about that in this report.
Scientists from Argentine Museum of Natural Sciences have discovered the fossils in the southern province of Santa Cruz. After studying the fossils measuring 10 meters, experts realized they were looking at the remains of a predatory dinosaur from the end of the age of dinosaurs.
We were lucky enough to discover 65 to 70 million year old rocks, very diverse fossil remains, of which one, the most relevant one, is a new predatory dinosaur from the group of megaraptors. The new dinosaur is represented by a part of the skeleton of an example that was approximately 10 meters, about 32 feet wide.
The defining characteristics of the megaraptors were their long arms and their thumb ended in a claw.
What stands out with the megaraptors was that they had very long arms, and when they were alive, the muscles were also very robust. And the most prominent thing was that their thumb ended in a claw measuring approximately 40 centimeters in length. Those were his main weapons, centered around his mouth and fundamentally in his hands, which allowed the megaraptor and his relatives to catch their prey.
Experts believe, unlike Tyrannosaurus rex, the megaraptors were slimmer and built for speed, with long tails that allowed them to keep their balance. They also had muscular but elongated legs to take long steps.
Well, in Brazil, people have found rescue in animals to deal with anxiety and emotional wreckage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Officials say an initiative, Pet Delivery, has already lured over 1,000 people interested in adopting an abandoned animal. This report has the details.
As the pandemic takes its toll on people's lives, imposing social distancing measures that keep families and friends apart, emotional distress has become a common side effect. To deal with that, in Brazil's COVID-19 hotspot Rio de Janeiro, the mayor's office has come up with a pet delivery campaign that has found homes to 53 animals since April 4. This is how Fatma adopted her dog to help her deal with the growing anxiety.
This moment we are going through is very difficult. It's difficult for everyone. I'm sure she will give me a lot of love, and I love her too because it's a pure love. It's a love that does not cost anything.
After the first contact, a questionnaire is applied to identify which animal is most suitable for each person. All adopted pets are sprayed, vaccinated, and given an identification chip before the delivery.
The animals for adoptions have all been mistreated for a long time and abandoned. When the animals are received by the shelter, they are examined. If the animal has not been castrated, then we prepare to do that. The animal is then vaccinated, dewormed, and we put a microchip for identification and to state whether the animal will be able to put up for adoption.
Rio de Janeiro's animal shelter currently has around 900 abandoned animals for adoption.
Oil prices have jumped to their highest in over 2 months on positive early results of a potential COVID-19 vaccine. They also picked up on optimism about a resumption in economic activity and signs that producers were following through on planned output reductions. Brent crude oil settled at over $35 a barrel after gaining nearly 8.5%. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crudes rose over 10% to about $32.5 a barrel. Those were the highest settles for Brent and WTI since March 11th, just a few days after prices began to collapse. They fell due to the failure of a production cut agreement between OPEC and Russia. Huawei says new U.S. export rules to limit its access to key technology threatens the global telecom industry. In a statement, Huawei rotating chairman Guo Ping says the U.S.'s move to curb its access to global chip supplies will inevitably hurt its business. Huawei said the new restrictions to limit its access to key technology are arbitrary and pernicious. However, Guo said Huawei was committed to complying with rules and had significantly increased R&D and inventory to meet the U.S. pressure. He said the U.S. campaign against Huawei will ultimately damage the country's credibility with international companies.
Our business will inevitably be massively impacted, but this past year of practice has given us a thick skin. We are confident that we can find a solution soon.
Well, the UK has announced a new post-Brexit tariff regime to replace the EU's external tariffs. After decades outsourcing its trade policy to the EU, Britain is seeking free trade agreements with countries around the world. Speaking to media, the UK International Trade Secretary Liz Truss said the new regime will maintain a 10% tariff on cars, but it will cut levies on tens of billions of dollars of supply chain imports. Truss said the new regime, known as UK Global Tariff, will be simpler and cheaper than the EU system. She said it would apply to countries with which the UK has no agreement and removes all tariffs below 2%. 60% of trade coming into the UK will be tariff-free on WTO terms or through existing preferential access. China says it will impose punitive duties, of more than 80% on Australian barley imports from today. The new tariffs are expected to halt $1 billion trade between the two countries. China's Ministry of Commerce said it had confirmed dumping by Australia has cast significant damage on its domestic industry. Responding to the new tariffs, Australia's Agriculture Minister, David Littleproud, said Canberra is not in a trade war with Beijing. The minister said Australia would consider going to the World Trade Organization to settle the case.
China's decision this morning, in fact we got late last night, to impose a tariff on our barley producers. To say that I'm disappointed is an understatement. This is something that we will strongly reject. The premise that the Australian barley farmer is subsidised in any way, shape or form. We will continue to prosecute that case.
European stock markets are trading lower, halting the positive trend set at the beginning of the week despite rising hopes for a COVID-19 vaccine. Investors' interest in the markets remains muted as stocks edge lower due to profit-taking. The CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 0.5% lower. London's FTSE 100 has lost marginally. Frankfurt's DAX is also trading marginally lower. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the gains, closing over 2% higher. Hong Kong's Hang Seng gained nearly 2%, while Japan's Nikkei 225 closed about 1.5% higher. The Shanghai Composite gained nearly 1%. Meanwhile, international benchmark Brent crude oil price has gained over 2%. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. Well, for the latest updates on these and other stories, you can always follow us on our social media at Indus.News. Thanks for watching.